In 1945, the world emerged from the ashes of the Second World War. Europe lay devastated. Cities were reduced to rubble. Industries destroyed, currencies weakened, and governments drowning in debt. While much of the world struggled to survive, one nation stood almost untouched by destruction: the United States. Its factories were intact, its gold reserves overflowing, and its economy stronger than ever. This imbalance created a historic opportunity, one that would quietly reshape the global financial system for generations to come. By the end of the war, nearly 3/4 of the world's gold reserves were held inside American vaults. Gold was still the foundation of trust in money, and whoever controlled gold controlled confidence. Nations needed stability, and stability required a trusted anchor. The United States understood this reality clearly. Gold was not just metal, it was power, leverage, and the key to rewriting the rules of global finance. World leaders feared something worse than poverty: chaos. Before the war, unstable currencies, competitive devaluations, and trade wars had helped trigger global collapse. No nation wanted to repeat that disaster. A new financial order was needed, one that promised stability, predictability, and cooperation. The question was simple: who would design it, and whose interests would it serve? In July 1944, even before the war officially ended, representatives from 44 nations gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Officially, the goal was cooperation. Unofficially, the foundation of American financial leadership was being laid. The United States arrived not as an equal participant, but as the dominant power, with gold, factories, and political influence on its side. At Bretton Woods, the rules of the new system were written. The US dollar would be tied to gold, fixed at $35 per ounce. Other currencies would be tied to the dollar. This design placed the dollar at the center of global trade, finance, and reserves. On paper, it looked cooperative. In reality, it placed unprecedented power in American hands. Because the dollar was backed by gold, it appeared trustworthy. Because the United States was politically stable, it appeared reliable. Nations accepted the system not because they were forced, but because alternatives were worse. Trust flowed into the dollar, not through speeches, but through necessity. The dollar quietly became the world's financial language. The International Monetary Fund was created to provide financial stability. Officially, it helped countries manage balance of payment problems. Unofficially, it enforced discipline. Loans came with conditions: policy changes, budget controls, and economic reforms. Over time, this mechanism gave the United States enormous influence over how other nations managed their economies. Alongside the IMF, the World Bank was created to rebuild war-torn nations. Roads, bridges, power plants. Development was financed through dollar-based loans. Reconstruction tied recovery directly to American capital. Growth became linked to debt, and debt became linked to the dollar. The system expanded quietly, brick by brick. The Marshall Plan poured billions of dollars into Europe. Officially, it was aid. Strategically, it was alignment. European economies rebuilt themselves using American money, American goods, and American systems. Trade patterns shifted, dependencies formed, and political loyalty followed economic recovery. By the late 1940s, the United States had not conquered territory, it had built a financial empire. Its power did not arrive with armies, but with agreements, institutions, and currency. The dollar was no longer just money. It was influence, stability, and control embedded deep within the structure of the global economy. On the surface, the Bretton Woods system appeared fair. Every nation had a vote, every currency had a place. But beneath the structure was a simple reality. Rules are never neutral when one player writes them. The United States didn't need to command others. It only needed the system to function exactly as designed. Central banks around the world began holding dollars instead of gold. It was easier, cheaper, and safer. Slowly, vaults that once stored gold began storing paper backed by American promises. Trust shifted from metal to government, and that government was the United States. Here was the advantage no empire before had ever possessed. The United States could print the very currency the world needed to trade. While other nations had to earn dollars, America could create them. This was not inflationary magic, it was structural privilege. Normally, trade deficits weaken a nation, but for the United States, deficits became a feature, not a flaw. Dollars flowed outward to buy goods, then flowed back as investments, reserves, and debt purchases. The system recycled American currency back into American control. Financial trust does not exist in isolation. Behind the dollar stood the strongest military in history. Aircraft carriers, overseas bases, and defense alliances acted as silent insurance. The message was never spoken, but always understood. The United States became the banker of last resort. When crises hit, nations looked to Washington, not just for money, but for permission. Liquidity flowed through American institutions. Access to dollars became access to survival. During the Cold War, financial alignment became political loyalty. Nations tied to the dollar system gained access to markets, capital, and security. Those who resisted found themselves isolated. Money became ideology without slogans. Even as Europe recovered, it remained dependent. Growth required dollars. Trade required dollars. Stability required dollars. Independence returned in form, but not in finance. By the 1960s, pressure began to build. The United States was spending heavily. Wars, welfare, expansion. Dollars flooded the world while gold reserves stayed finite. A question quietly formed. Were there really enough gold reserves to back all these dollars? Some nations began demanding gold instead of dollars. Vaults opened. Ships moved. Confidence trembled. The system that relied on trust now faced its first true test. By the early 20th century, America was no longer just a nation, it was becoming a financial machine. Railroads, steel, oil, and banking were merging into something far more powerful than governments themselves, corporations with influence over money, labor, and law. A small group of bankers and industrialists realized something dangerous. Whoever controlled credit controlled the future. Money was no longer gold in a vault. It was numbers created through debt. This realization led to secret meetings, private negotiations, and plans that would permanently reshape America's financial system without public consent. In 1910, on a private island called Jekyll Island, powerful bankers met in total secrecy. Their goal was simple: design a central banking system that appeared public, but served private interests. 3 years later, in 1913, the Federal Reserve was born. Despite its name, it was neither federal nor a true reserve. It was a private banking cartel with the legal authority to create money. From that moment on, money was created as debt. Every dollar entered circulation with interest attached, meaning the system required endless growth to survive. But growth has limits, and when growth slowed, the cracks appeared. The 1929 stock market crash was not an accident. It was a mathematical inevitability. Millions lost jobs, homes, and savings, yet the banks survived. Why? Because the system was designed to transfer risk downward while protecting those at the top. To prevent rebellion, the solution was control through dependence. Social programs expanded, but so did taxation and surveillance. America had entered a new phase, not of freedom, but of managed stability. The illusion of choice remained, while the structure beneath became tighter than ever. After the Great Depression, a new promise was sold to the public: stability. People were told the chaos was over, that the system had been fixed. But in reality, the foundation remained the same, only the rules had changed. World War II accelerated everything. War required massive funding, and funding required debt. The Federal Reserve printed money, governments borrowed endlessly, and America emerged as the world's financial center. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement reshaped global money. The dollar was tied to gold, and every other currency was tied to the dollar. On paper, it looked fair. In practice, it gave America unmatched power. For decades, the system worked because the world trusted the dollar. But trust is fragile, and by the late 1960s, America had printed more dollars than it had gold to back them. In 1971, President Nixon made a historic move. He removed the dollar from gold entirely. Overnight, money became pure belief, backed by nothing but confidence. This was the birth of fiat money. Governments could now print without limits. Debt exploded, consumption increased, and inflation quietly began eroding purchasing power. People worked harder, saved less, and borrowed more. Wages stagnated, but prices rose. The gap between effort and reward kept widening. To maintain control, complexity was introduced. Financial products became too complicated for ordinary people to understand. Risk was hidden behind fine print. Then came the crises again and again. 1987, 2000, 2008. Each time, the public paid the price while institutions were rescued. By now, the pattern was clear. Losses were socialized. Profits were privatized. And the cycle continued, unchallenged, unquestioned.